Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Native Voices in STEM on this beautiful Tucson sunny March 1st. I will turn over the moderating of this seminar to Wilzave Kile Guzman, who works with Dr. Carletta Chief in the Indigenous Resilience Center and in the Department of Environmental Science. Thank you, Wilzave.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this seminar. First of all, I would like to begin by doing the land acknowledgement. So we respectfully acknowledge the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being the home of the Tohon, of the Odam and the Yaqui. Committed to the diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. The Native Voice in STEM seminar series is co-sponsored by the NSF NRT Indigenous Food, Energy, and Water Security and Sovereignty Program, the Control Environment Agriculture Center in the Department of Biosystems Engineering, the University of Arizona, Sloan Indigenous Graduate Partnership, the Water Resources Research Center, the Indigenous Resilience Center, and the Office of Societal Impact. The seminar highlights Native scientists, engineers, educators, leaders, and social activists. It offers students an opportunity to network and learn about the research and careers of Native leaders in various fields. Having said this, I would like to welcome Dr. Ruth Plenty Sweetgrass-She, who is an enrolled citizen of the 3 affiliated tribes of the 4th Berthold Indian Reservation. I turn it into you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. That was exciting to hear all of the sponsors, the amount of support that you have is astounding. That's exciting. So I really appreciate being here today and being able to share a little bit about the work that I do at the Fort Berthold Community College. Is our former college name. We're now Nuetza Hidatsa Sanish College. And okay, a little bit of background about me. I'm enrolled at Fort Berthold, and so this is my reservation. So we're pretty close to Canada. I am Hidatsa and Mandan. So the 3 tribes are Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara. And I am Mahochadi, which is Alkali Lodge. My Hidatsa name translates to grows different. I'm also descended from the Fort Peck Sioux and Assiniboine. So the Fort Peck Reservation is in northeastern Montana. So there's the reservation. I'm descended from the Red Bottom Band, and when I did live on the reservation, I lived among the Wadopana Band, or canoe paddlers of the Assiniboine, and my Assiniboine name is Night Wind Woman, and my Dakota name that I carry from my grandmother is Good Woman. So that's just to give you a little bit of orientation about who I am, who my people are. And there's a picture of one of our buttes back home here, and we still have a lot of snow and ice. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of history about my people and then bring you to where we are currently. My people that I was raised among, so the Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara people, lived along rivers in earth lodges, and we had beautiful large gardens. And in this picture you see a woman cutting squash. And here she has a buffalo shoulder blade that she's using to cut squash. Here she has all of the squash laid out, and then here she's drying squash. So if you've ever cut squash, to me, even just cutting a few, my hands get tired. I can't imagine the amount of work on your hands to cut that much squash. Here's some other historical pictures. You see one of the hoes for the garden. You see this is one of the rakes. A lot of times the rakes for the gardens were made with deer antlers. In addition to gardening, you see a woman holding a braid of turnips. So these are wild prairie turnips. And our people were so proficient at gardening, we often had surplus. We had to be able to make it through the winter. And so here is a photograph on the bottom right-hand corner of one of our cache pits where we would store our produce. And like I said, we had a surplus. So here's a couple maps of the Mandan Hidatsa Trade Center, Arikara Trade Center. And this just says pre-contact as far as this map goes, but you see all of the ways that our food systems and our people interacted. Here's a different map, and this is estimated around 1775. So again, you see the Mandan Hidatsa people, like I mentioned, were along the river, the Arikara people, and then some of the other trade centers further to the west. Here's another map right around 1800, and you see some of the trade routes coming in a little more from the east. So our people grew corn, beans, squash, melons, tobacco, and sunflowers were our primary crops. And the women were the ones who took care of the gardens. So they owned the gardens, they owned the produce, any surplus, they had the authority to trade. So they had a powerful role in our food system as well as the market. So that's where we were pre-contact. And then there was a lot of things that happened that really either, one of the words that I think of as disruption, but it's way more than a disruption. So atrocities that happened to our people and impacted both our history as well as our food system. So of course, European intrusion. And I'm not great with, I know words are important. And so I'm not sure if that's the exact word that is appropriate, but my people experienced 3 smallpox epidemics, one in 1782, one in 1836, and then another one the subsequent year. So being people who lived in earth lodges, it was a little bit harder for us to spread out. So when it impacted us, it really was devastating, and sometimes 60 to 70 to even greater percentages of villages were decimated within a month. So you think about that huge disruption in our knowledge system when you lose that many people that quickly, and that transfer of knowledge hasn't happened. And I think about our smallpox epidemics and what we've been experiencing with the COVID pandemic. So that was a huge impact on our people. We also had treaty period. So we had our gardens, we had our trade routes, and then the treaty period started to diminish our access to land and our traditional land base and the relationships that we had with the land. We also had the Indian boarding schools starting in 1617 to present. So that's just broadly, not just specifically my tribe. In my family, we have 4 generations of family who have gone to boarding school. So my mother's generation, my grandmother's generation, my great-grandmother's generation, and my great-great-grandmother's generation. So my generation is the first generation that did not attend boarding school. Then again, you know, we had treaty making, then we had the allotment period, which further separated us from the land. And as a gardening people, you think of how important the land is to us, and you think about the access to wild game, to be able to leave and access wild game. That was a huge disruption again on our food systems. Something that I always think is interesting is in 1924 was the Native American Citizenship Act. Well, my grandmother was born in 1919, and her lineage, of course, has been on this continent from time immemorial, but she wasn't a citizen of the country. And so that kind of is like, wow, who who is American or who is Native and who makes those determinations. We also were impacted by the Relocation Act. So taking away our land, taking our children out of our communities, and then taking whole families out of our communities and relocating them into more metropolitan areas, cities, further disrupted or negatively impacted the transfer of our traditional knowledge. And something that I don't know if it's a direct connection in our thoughts all the time, but not being able to have the freedom to practice our religion until 1978. And you think about the specific foods associated with some of our ceremonies. So again, that also did impact our food systems. The Indian Child Welfare Act and trying to protect keeping our children connected and in our communities. And more recently, the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. So thinking about our, how much of our culture, our people, our seeds that were taken out of our communities. And then in 1990, this act saying we need to start to bring those things back into our communities. And what's sad to me is that's still going on 30 years later. There's places that are not compliant with NAGPRA. So I mentioned our food systems and access to wild game. So this is just a quick map of looking at our bison. And you'll see starting out pre-contact, and then we get into contact, and then we get into, this was an estimate of 2003, the distribution of bison herds. So definitely a major negative impact on our food system as well as our culture when you think about how our relationship was and is with the bison. And I mentioned land. So this is the Treaty of 1851 and the land base for the 3 affiliated tribes. And this, again, diminishes. So there's 1870, you see our land base in the light blue. And in 1880, you see it has shrunk again. And then finally, in 1891, you have the remaining size of the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation. So definitely reducing that relationship that we've had for so many generations with the land. And I think that's true across so many of our tribal nations, both federally, state recognized, and those that don't have recognition, where some of us fortunately do have a land base, but some of us don't. And so here's just a map of our reservations across the United States. I said, thinking about my grandmother and not being a citizen when she was born. And so as I was preparing for my talk, I was thinking, well, okay, well, let's do a quick Google and what makes us Native American, because I was thinking about epistemologies and worldview. So I typed that in, and the first thing that popped up was it started talking about certificate degree of Indian blood. And I really grapple with that because of is that really what makes us Native? Is your blood quantum? And what about all of these other things within our culture, within our knowledge systems, our food systems, our relationships that make us who we are as Native people? So I just wanted to share this because it really was like a tack that pricked me and kind of annoyed me when I'm thinking about who we are and where we're going now into the future. So this is my grandmother, and she was so beautiful. I never knew her. This is her as a young woman. I knew this is the grandmother that I grew up with over here on the bottom corner of the picture. And I was her oldest granddaughter. So I spent a lot of time with her, hearing her talk about her childhood, and she grew up in this community called Alba Woods. And at that time on our reservation, we had a good timber industry, because being along the river, we had a lot of trees. We had access to a lot of berries, wild plums, a lot of turnips, wild onions, and a lot of people still continued to garden. So our people were very self-reliant at that time when my grandmother grew up, and she would talk about just this. It was like a just a dream to me to think about this time in our people's history. But then we had the Garrison Dam. As my grandmother was a young woman and was a mother, they constructed the Garrison Dam. So you see her community here, Alba Woods. The light blue line is the actual river, and then the dark blue is the reservoir. So you see how many of our communities were flooded and had to be relocated. So you see the squares. I love that whoever made this map used different shapes, because my professor for my master's was colorblind. And so you had to be very aware of how you presented information. And I grew up down here in Mandaree, and Newtown is up in the top there. But over 80% of our tribal population had to be relocated. Prior to the dam, our people were gardeners, they did trades, they ranched, so they were, like I said, very self-sufficient. After the dam, we still continued to garden and farm, but we had lost about 155,000 acres of land, and over a quarter, so it was over a quarter of our land base. Of that, 94% of it was prime agricultural land. And I mentioned, that was 80% of our tribal membership were relocated, but also there was non-tribal people living in those communities too that had to be relocated. At that time, it was the 5th largest dam in the United States. And you know what else? If you don't know about the Garrison Dam, they could have built the dam further to the west of us. It would have flooded out non-tribal, non-native people's agricultural land, but they could have built it somewhere else, but they chose to build it down by Garrison. And so it was our land that ended up being flooded. One of the anecdotal things that our community doctor mentioned was, prior to the dam, there were no incidents of diabetes. After the dam is when we saw our first incidents of diabetes, as well as a marked increase in alcoholism. So those are some of the other impacts from the Garrison Dam on our people. This is one of my aunts, my oldest aunt, and she was very much into her career focused on racial justice and social justice. So here's a quote from Damned Indians. So yep, my people are some damned Indians. And he was writing specifically about the Garrison Dam as the single most destructive act perpetuated against an American Indian tribe. So I think about where my people were pre-contact and how beautiful I think about our history and the gardens and the trade and the food. And I think about the stories from my grandmother and Alba Woods and just all of this beautiful time. And I think about the impacts of all of the things that I shared in the previous slide, and the things that were taken, and the things that we were never asked about, or even if we were asked, it was just ignored. And it's that heart work now. So as a scholar, as an Indigenous scholar, I don't have a lot of answers, but I love Trixie. My one little guy likes to watch Toy Story. So I have a question. No, I have all the questions. And that's how I feel as an Indigenous scholar. It's like, all right, well, here's this historical context. Here's where we are now. Here's where we want to be into the future. And a colleague of mine shared this slide that I think I like as I vision for the future of our people. All the evidence suggests that we have constantly exaggerated the contributions of technological genius and underestimated the contributions of natural resources. We need something we lost in our haste to remake the world, a sense of limits, an awareness of the importance of Earth's resources. And so that was Stuart Udall. And I think about, well, whose advances and, what kind of technology. And so, of course, my brain's going as an Indigenous scholar, having this very rich history to draw from. And I mentioned I was preparing for my talk and thinking about, all right, well, what makes us Native? And doing Indigenous research methodologies, I'm very privileged to have the wealth of literature that exists from previous Indigenous scholars as well as contemporary Indigenous scholars. So thinking about our Indigenous epistemology, thinking about what is knowledge, what is knowable, and really agreeing with and totally having that resonate. Of course, it's our cultures, it's our worldviews, it's our times, our languages, our histories, our spiritualities, and even our land. And so taking a look again at this quote and getting back to thinking about our world and our relatives and the relationships we have. And you see that push for Indigenous ecological knowledge. So to me, it's an exciting time to be an Indigenous scholar. And thinking again, all of those things that happened, and now we hear about food sovereignty. And so what is sovereignty? Supreme power and authority. So all of those years where our land was taken, our children were taken, families were taken, our seeds were taken, our other artifacts from our people were taken, our language was taken. But now, as we come back to being able to work towards or embrace having the authority of what happens to our languages, what happens to our food systems. And I'm really blessed to have some amazing colleagues who I get to visit with and bounce ideas off of and learn about their research. So one of the things that I've been learning about is Indigenous data. And this is some information that one of my colleagues shared with me. Indigenous data is, what is it? So it's data, it's information and knowledge in any format that impacts Indigenous peoples, nations, and communities at the collective and individual levels. So bringing it into, so to me, to some of that's kind of like Western language, but bringing that into a language that resonates with who I am as an Indigenous person and my experiences, our land, our water, our soil, our plants, our animals, our information, our knowledge, our archives, our oral histories, our ancestral knowledge, our stories are examples of Indigenous data. And so one of the things that is really important right now is then Indigenous data sovereignty and the right of Indigenous peoples and nations to govern the collection, ownership, and application of our own data. And that's like super exciting to me. It's like, yes, I feel like it's so empowering to finally have that authority over ourselves, over our, and being a woman, I think of our bodies, to make those decisions of who has access, of how things are used. And so one of the things that I've been working on is seed rematriation. And part of that has happened through a project that we're working on, and it probably wouldn't have happened if we didn't find out that we needed to work with our collaborating, our partners on the project for NAGPRA. And so that's all I'll say about that part of it. But again, it's part of that heart work. It's part of our history, and we're bringing our seeds home. We're bringing our relatives home, and that feels good, but in a way too, it's that sadness of how long they've been gone from us. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as part of the work that we're doing. Taking things back and being empowered and being sovereign, thinking about our knowledge systems, thinking about our education systems. Here's a map of our tribal colleges and universities. Isn't that beautiful? And this may be an older map. I know there's some tribal colleges and universities that aren't part of AHEC. So I just wanted to share this beautiful map. And whoops, I'm gonna go back. Here's my institution, Hidatsa Sanish College, right here. I work in the agricultural department of our institution. So above you see our vision for the department, our mission, and then specifically for the food sovereignty program, we are working to increase the Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara Nation's food sovereignty and community health by growing, demonstrating, learning, and inspiring through our gardens. So fortunately, one of the things that our college has access to is 30 acres of land. So in 1994, we were given land grant status, and in 1997, we entered into an agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers, the group of people or the organization that flooded our reservation. But anyway, we have a lease for what was then called the Land Lab of approximately 30 acres. It started out as a traditional and community gardening area. We have a faculty member, Bernadine Youngbird, who teaches our traditional gardening courses. And we've also been doing over 20 years of Juneberry research, so community assessments and working to reestablish Juneberries, which is one of our traditional foods. And again, the Garrison Dam negatively impacted our access to Juneberries, which is important for not just our regular day-to-day food system, but also some of our ceremonies. Some of the other things that we're doing in our agriculture department, our land lab was renamed to the Four Sisters. So I mentioned we grow corn, beans, squash, and sunflowers. So that's where the name Four Sisters came from. We introduced sustainable gardening practices in 2015. So that was in our research plots. Of course, in our traditional garden, they already had those practices ongoing. One of the cool things at our institution level, not just in the department, our gardening course was accepted as a wellness credits as part of our general education requirements. Let's see. So I mentioned, another cool thing about our gardening course, we have 2 Native American Studies degrees, and so that course is now a requirement for our Native American Studies degrees. And here's Bernadine. Bernadine is my older clan sister, and we're down at the traditional gardens. And here's me, and this is my daughter, and she just looks so thrilled to be down at the garden, doesn't she? We were the first planting. So the first planting happens in April, and we plant the sunflowers. So the sunflowers go around the perimeter of the garden. And as we've been doing this work, we're thinking about, of course, the food production. So the gardening, the seed saving, but also who are the other producers in our area. So farmers and ranchers. We've been doing work with food preparation, food preservation. We're trying to incorporate the next stages or steps are the foraging, gathering, hunting. How do we add fishing, add those into the work that we do as an institution and as our agriculture department, our traditional foods, and then of course the market. And one of the things I learned last night, I'm taking a course through the continuing education unit of IAIA, which is another TCU. And so it's a virtual course. It's a traditional medicinal plants class, and it's taught by Josh Dunn. And one of the nuggets that I thought was so cool was he shared with us it takes 20 generations for a species, not just humans, but a species to adapt to, I'd have to pull it up the exact language, but to new foods. So you think about how long ago was it that we were separated from being able to have the gardens, from being able to hunt the bison, from being able to trade, and then the introduction of commodities. It's not that many generations. And so, of course, our bodies haven't adapted to these new foods being introduced. And he also shared about the impacts that some communities have seen of returning to our traditional foods. So the impact on the diseases that we're experiencing now, especially the impacts on blood sugar, that was really amazing. So trying to incorporate again our traditional foods into our diets in our homes, but I would also love to see that at a larger scale in our schools, in our community events where we are commonly eating our traditional foods. So I'm going to share with you some pictures of some of the work that we've been doing. So here's my colleague Jessica down at the gardens and some of our students, and you can see some of our corn and peppers, and here's some of our corn. This is just some of the different ways that we dry our corn, and corn is so beautiful. We've got, I think the estimate is between 15 and 20 different varieties of corn. Here is one of our traditional foods, corn balls. So I took some of our blue corn, and when we parch our blue corn to make the corn balls, it turns brown. I thought it would have stayed blue, but it turns brown, and it's a really simple. So here's corn, you incorporate berries, and then to keep its shape, you add a little bit of fat. So corn, berries, and fat, and that's all the ingredients to make corn balls, and they are so yummy, especially if you have June berries. So that's one of our foods. So we've shared our corn ball making with other sister tribes and other colleges. Here's some pemmican. So again, meat, dried meat, berries, and fat. 3 ingredients. Isn't that just cool? How many ingredients do you find just like on your margarine or butter or cereal? You know, not very often is it only 3. Here is food preservation. So some spiral cut squash that I dried in my car one summer. Again, some food preservation. So drying meat on one of those little clothes drying racks in my house, teaching my niece. So making sure that that knowledge is transferred on to the younger generations. Here's some beautiful, beautiful June berries. If you haven't had June berries, they're also called service berries or Saskatoon berries or Savis berries or other names for June berries. And here, these are not June berries, but these are choke cherry patties. And that is a windshield. I did dry them on cookie sheets in my car. So I didn't have to use electricity in a dehydrator. Some of the wild plants that we gather, these are wild onions. These are some of the wild turnips, and this is wild mint. And if you haven't, wild mint is like a whole different level compared to peppermint, in my opinion. So if you have access to wild mint, you're lucky. We also have been doing our farmers markets again now that the pandemic has slowed a little bit. And I mentioned we've shared making corn balls, but we've also shared, so this is Jerry John Drew and Howard Kimawan, and they are over in Michigan. They came and they taught us how to make our corn mortars and pestles, because we used them historically, but we didn't have any tribal members who still knew how to make them. So they came all the way from Michigan and showed us how to make corn mortars and pestles. And one of the cool things, we went to Jerry's farm last summer. So this is some of his maple sugar. Here they're constructing a trough, and we actually made maple sugar with their trough. So sharing again those knowledge systems, you're thinking about those trade routes, those connections we had with our sister tribes across the region, and starting to revitalize that. It's an exciting time. So here's two of the mortars and pestles that we made. Again, my clan sister Bernadine and some of our high school students this summer, they just had a blast pounding on that corn. Oh, and that's the inside of one of our earth lodges. So the relationships, it's beautiful. Here is, if you know Deb Echohawk, she's one of the Pawnee seed keepers. And this is Gloria Wilkinson. And she's a master basket maker and a master gardener. There's my daughter. There's the hand of my little guy. And then this is Deb's, I can't remember if it's her daughter or her niece. And then here's some other beautiful people. DeAndre Smiles, Kevin Deere, Linda Black Elk, Luke Black Elk. And so it's an exciting time to be an Indigenous scholar. It's an exciting time to be working in the field of food sovereignty and having these conversations and sharing. So even remembering those atrocities, remembering those hardships and everything that was taken, and working to rebuild and to take back that authority, it's an exciting time. So getting close to the end here, I know we want to save some time for discussion, but I wanted to share just a few of the people you may want to check out some of their work, or to also acknowledge some of the knowledge keepers who've shared with me. So there's a list, and I had mentioned Jerry John Drew, and of course Linda and Luke were in the photograph. There's Becky and Stephen Webster. Check them out on Facebook. They're doing some really, really cool things over in Wisconsin. And a lot of the work that we do now with our gardening comes from Buffalo Bird Woman's Garden, and it's available free PDF on the internet. I mentioned my clan sister, Bernadine Youngbird. She's the faculty member at our college. Gloria Wilkinson, she did pass on the right to me to make baskets. Gerard Baker, he's one of our seed keepers, and we're working with him on a seed multiplication project. And then just also acknowledging some of the other matriarchs in our community, our recent history, Wanda Shepherd, Lydia Sage Chase, and Tilly Walker. And then some of the people who are doing the work now in our community, Cynthia Bauman, Melanie Moniz, and Jessica Whiteplume. So sometimes people talk about us being crabs in a bucket, but we can be monkeys in a barrel and work together on some of these issues. And there's so much work for us to do, and we each bring different gifts. And so being able to contribute in different ways, it's just this beautiful vision of what the future can be and what we're creating right now. I just want to make sure and acknowledge some of the funding that we've received to do the work. So we have USDA likes us and believes in the work that we're doing. So we do have some funding from the USDA as well as the American Indian College Fund. So I just wanted to acknowledge them. And like I've been talking to you about, our grandmothers and our ancestors and everything that they've sacrificed, but that they've also protected for us to be where we are today. And this is my daughter. and we think about those future generations, those little ones that are with us now and those little ones that are yet to come. And that's who we do our work for, I believe. So if you want to get in contact with me, there's my 2 email addresses, my work email, my personal email. I love the idea of dam removal. So if anybody wants to talk with me about dam removal, and especially the removal of the Garrison Dam, contact me. We'll chat. Or if you want to talk about other things, I love plants. So in closing, I just wanted to say Madzagrats, thank you to Carletta. And I tried to encompass all of the sponsors. This is what I was able to pull from the website. But I know that there's a lot of people that make these kinds of events happen and bringing us all together. And so even though there's that list there, there's also those that are unspoken. And then just also thinking about the phenomenal woman that Carletta is. She's like a shero to me, and she's not here with us today. And so just sending her good thoughts and appreciation for allowing me to be part of this space today. So I'm pretty sure that's my last slide. Yep, it is. Look at my time. Didn't I do awesome?
You did amazing. Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you so much. I would like to open this space for everybody to have, if anybody has any questions, any comments, please feel free to speak up. I am just like super moved and in wonders of this presentation. It has been amazing. I study water resources, and understanding that part of an unfortunate water history is super important moving forward now in between of all these water scarcity issues and things. Acknowledging those things and making them better for in the present and in the future is essential. So thank you so much for sharing that. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to speak up.
And if there's no questions, oh, go ahead.
I'll defer to Sharon and I'll ask mine at the end if there's time.
Thank you so much. That was just a wonderful presentation, and I really appreciate all of your insights and experiences. I'm curious, you talked a lot about the trade connections historically pre-contact. I wonder if as part of your work or others' work that's happening across that region, if there are efforts to help restore those connections. Like, is there some talk or action around trading food across those important connections from the past?
Yes. There's I've been part of some discussions, and we're, I think, working towards the visioning and how's that going to happen. And to some degree that already is happening on a smaller scale, but how do you scale it up? So to some degree, yes. And I think that's becoming more necessary. Like I said, some of us, in my community, it's hard to grow certain foods because we don't have access to land. Like I mentioned, the seed multiplication. So that's a collaboration we have with the USDA Agricultural Research Service, because they have the space and the person power to hand pollinate all of our varieties of corn, whereas we don't have the land base or the people power to hand pollinate. And we have 20 varieties of corn, and you have to, over here, because of the wind, you have to grow corn a mile apart from any other corn. So we can't do that. And being able to collaborate, work with, share with our sister tribes in the region enables us to have access to some of our traditional foods or almost traditional foods. And I think too, it's really liberating to have our own market system rather than the existing market system. So yes.
That's great. Thank you.
Could you just give us an update how everyone at your college is surviving this huge storms, the series of storms we've had?
So at my institution, in my community today, it is sunny. It is like blue skies, and there was some snow last night, but I know some of our sister institutions further to the south. So I know we were supposed to have some training from United Tribes, and so that is being rescheduled because of the snow. But that's part of it being February in the Northern Plains is I think probably the hardest thing is when we have power outages. That's probably the hardest thing, or individual community members when they don't have heat. But so far it seems like typical typical February.
Thank you. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
So I was wondering if you could talk more about the efforts around the dam.
I don't know what the efforts are around the dam, but I'd want to see it gone. It pisses me off. I mean, I learned about the history a little bit from my grandmother, and we learned about that in high school through Jeanette LaRocque's class, and some of the legislation and the protests of we don't want the dam, we don't want the dam, we don't want the dam, but they built the dam anyway. And we see now examples of dam removal, and we see how it impacts us ecologically. And so it's like, all right, well, let's get rid of this dam because there are potential ecological benefits, and maybe my feet will be able to touch the ground that my grandmother's feet touched. Because right now I can be in a boat above her community, but right now that's like the only way I'll ever be able to be in Alba Woods. And so if I could see that in my lifetime, yeah, you know, maybe it'll never happen, but I try to, as much as I possibly can, plant that seed. Let's get rid of dams and let's start with Garrison Dam. So it's right now, it's just me that I know of.
Okay. Thank you. So Carletta Chief was able to pop in and join us, and I just want to invite Carletta to unmute yourself if you're able, and say hello. And then I do know that in the interest of supporting our students in getting to their 1 o'clock class on time, we'll probably end in 3 or 4 minutes. Carletta?
Thank you, Cara. Thank you so much, Ruth, for doing this presentation and sharing about your amazing work around Indigenous food sovereignty. I feel like it really brings us closer to the reason why we're doing the work that we do, which is for our communities, our relatives. And I just honor all the work that you've been doing and being able to share that with our students today. And I look forward to future connections through Native Voices in STEM, as well as Native Fuse Alliance, particularly how we can better support our students. And I apologize for missing the first part. I had a doctor's appointment because I'm have a cold right now with my daughter. So thank you so much. And we look forward to future conversations.
Thanks, Carletta. And Anne Grant put in the chat, I don't know if this was mentioned or not, but a good book around the topic, the dam, is called Coyote Warrior, One Man, Three Tribes, and the Trial That Forged a Nation by Paul Van Develder. Thank you. A good tip.
Well, and another, so if people like videos, a movie that was made by a tribal member that is about the dam, but is also about relocation, is Water Buster. And I think his name is Juan Pianado. but that's just trying to remember off the top of my head, but Water Buster is a really good video. And that's, if there's no questions, I just want to say one last thing. Thinking about, they, in the beginning, they mentioned that there was going to be potentially a lot of students on the call or in the seminar today. And the work that, like what Carletta said, the work that we do, it's definitely heart work, and it's for our communities. And a lot of times it comes from knowing the history and knowing our cultures and wanting to build something beautiful, but that also can be really hard, and that can be emotionally draining. And so I just wanted to acknowledge the hard work that the students are doing as they continue to pursue their education and contribute to this beautiful future for our people.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ruth Plenty Sweetgrass-She for being here with us. We appreciate you taking your time to present to us. This was amazing. Thank you everyone for being here present. Thank you to IndiGeoFuse, Control Environment Agriculture Center, UA Sloan Partnership, IRS, WRRC. And please invite your friends to the next seminar, which is in the chat. So everybody have a great evening, a great afternoon.
Thank you to our speaker, and thank you to Wilzave for moderating today. Have a lovely day, everyone. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Really appreciate